Hello, welcome to Yellow Door Urban Homestead. I am Asia and I'm an urban gardener growing in a small space in my backyard. So it is kind of early in the morning, early in the morning, and someone asked about how I water my garden. And you know, it makes so much sense. I think that's one of the things that we don't talk about a lot, how you water your garden, because underwatering and overwatering can have the same symptoms, can have the same traits. It can look the same. And so I'm gonna do a video today on how I water my garden. So let's go ahead and get into that, y'all. So one of the important things to know as it relates to watering your garden is knowing which plants have shallow roots and which plants have deep roots. Well, in my opinion, it's one of the important things to know. So I'm over here by the beans. In the bean patch, if you remember in my last garden tour, the beans at one end of the patch, nice and green, growing lush. The beans at the other end of the patch were yellow and looking really odd. So one of the things I originally thought about, because beans don't need a lot of nitrogen, a lot of fertilizer, they just don't. I was like, well, it's possible that I'm either underwatering it or I'm overwatering them. So I'm gonna show you the soil by the beans that were yellow, and then I'm gonna show you the soil by the beans that are doing just fine. Why it's different on this end and not on that end, I don't know. But it's one of the things you have to do. Another important part of making sure that you water your garden correctly is paying attention to your garden. It's not always fertilized. So I left this a bit dry, and so I could do this video and so I could show you. Okay, so you see here, this is an old leaf. This is one of the leaves that was in the shot when I did my last garden tour. And this is a newer leaf since I've started watering these, like 6 better. Same thing here, that's a new one. That's an old one, but let me show you. This soil is dry. I mean, it is dry. And for a plant with a shallow root, if the top portion of the soil is dry, that means their roots aren't getting water. If the roots are not moist, then they're not pulling up the nutrients from the soil. Let's look at the other one. So let's slide down in here and look at the soil. You see the difference? That soil is not dry. Again, I have no idea why they're in the same bed and why the soil down there is dry. I could also go ahead and put some compost on it, because compost is organic matter, which allows the soil to hold the moisture easily. I don't have any compost. I will not be doing that today. But what I will do is go ahead and water those plants. Okay, so I have my Vevor hose reel, which I'm still very much enjoying, and I will link again so that everyone else can enjoy it too. I'm gonna go ahead and water these. And so the person who asked about watering asked, so do you spray everything or do you spray on the ground? So it depends on what I'm watering. If I'm honest, normally the bean plants, I would just kind of turn on the water and spray. I'm gonna do the tomatoes in a little while, and I definitely would not do that to the tomatoes because of the amount of disease that could come from me watering over top of the tomatoes. Now listen, I'm gonna be honest with you all. I'm not sure how much I believe it, but I still do it because you know, everything that I watch says that. But it rains. It rains all the time. And, you know, the plants get wet. But I do not do that. I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't do that. I water directly on the soil, and I'll show you that. But beans, I normally will just spray, just being honest with you. But if you want to make sure you're getting the soil, because your leaves is not what needs the water in most cases. It's the soil that needs the water. And so watering directly onto the soil, not a bad thing. Maybe you have to do a little more work, bend down, that kind of stuff. But it's getting the water where it needs to go. And so I use the shower a lot in the garden. It's a really good setting on here. And so another thing you'll want to pay attention to, my garden bed is somewhat on a slope, but do you see the runoff? This is runoff. And so if you're noticing that the water is running off and not going down, you might want to give it a few minutes and then come back and water it. And I did, because my memory card was full and I had to go and change it. So we're going to come back and we're going to water again. And what I want you to notice is how the water seeps down into the ground. It does not run off of the plant, because your root ball is like around the plant. Let's see, is around the plant. So your root ball is like right here. You need that water to soak in and go into the roots. I know we like to maybe water right around the plant, but the roots go out much further than just where the plant is. All right, so let's water and watch the water go down into the soil. You see? It's got a little bit of runoff because it's on a slope, but you can see where the water is going down into the soil. That's what you want to see. If the water is sitting on top of the soil, it could be because it's super dry and it needs time to actually moisten the soil. Or it could be because it's poor drainage in the soil. And in that case, I just recommend adding some organic matter. We forgot about and so with watering those green beans, I'm not going to water the green beans at the other end. They don't need water. And so another thing, you don't have to water your whole garden the same. All plants don't need the same thing. As you learn to garden, as you watch your garden, you will notice that. For instance, peppers, which we're going to water a little bit later, they don't mind drying out. As a matter of fact, they don't like wet feet. That's what they call it. So they don't want their roots to be super wet all the time. And so I don't water my peppers every time I water my garden because they don't need it. So another thing you'll want to think about when you are watering your garden is your garden bed densely planted? If your garden bed is densely planted, chances are you may have to water a little more than you would if it was not densely planted. Most of my garden beds are densely planted because I don't have a lot of space. So densely planting means they're gonna need more nutrients. The garden bed is gonna need more nutrients, it's gonna need more water because there's more plants soaking that stuff up in the bed. And so in this bed, it is very densely planted. We've got calendula, we got Swiss chard, we have beans, we have basil, peppers, all of that in this one bed. And so I'll tell you what I do, and I think it's just easiest way to do it in a garden bed is to stick your finger down in the soil. Let me show you. Which, I'm not going to show you sticking my finger down in the soil. Well, I am, but that's not what I'm showing you because we all know how to do that. I want to show you what my finger looks like when it comes out. And this is how I know whether I need to water or whether I don't. And when we come back up, it is a bit dry. So I can feel a little bit of water, but on my finger, it is dry. So we're gonna go ahead and water this bed too. This bed has peppers in it, which does not mind drying out, but I'm gonna show you what I do. Okay, so as it relates to this section right here, my chickens are going crazy. As it relates to this section right here, I am literally just gonna spray. And this is beans, Swiss chard, calendula, and marigold. So I don't do any different kind of spraying with them. I don't focus on the soil, you know, like going deep down over by the soil like I did with the beans. I just spray. There's also beans in this bed, and I'm just gonna spray. Of course, you do want to make sure that the soil is getting moistened, but I'm okay to get water on these leaves, in my opinion. I'm just showing you how I do it. Okay, now, so I've finished watering. I'm going to stick my finger back in here, and I'm going to show you what moist soil looks like on your finger coming out. Same hole. Do you see the difference? That's very moist because, of course, I just did it. But you want to have some moisture on your finger. If it comes out dry, then you know you need to water. So another thing that I do is I water deeply. I'm going to show you how I do the peppers that have other things around it. But another thing that I do is I water deeply. And what that means is I water it very heavily. And so for areas that, you know, need to be moist quite often or pretty much all the time consistently, I water the area very deeply. So I may take 2, 3, 4, I don't know, however long to water till when I stick my finger in, down to my knuckle at least, it's wet. And that way the water is down in the bottom of the soil, and when the top of the soil dries out, it's still wet deeper down into the soil. So watering deeply, especially when it's like super hot, is a great idea. Of course, also mulching. I just haven't found any straw. I think someone asked me how I mulch. I'll use leaves, like the potato bags, they have leaves in them. I prefer straw, but where I am, we have Tractor Supply. And so if Tractor Supply doesn't have any straw, then I don't have any straw. So I don't have any mulch on my garden right now, and I do have to water quite frequently because we have been in the 80s. Yesterday was so hot, I don't even know how to explain how hot it was. It wasn't in the hundreds or anything, but it felt like it because the sun was beaming down. Anywho, let's get back to watering this garden. I'm going to show you how I water the peppers that have a mix of Swiss chard in it as well. And really, I'm not going to show you watering the peppers. I'm going to show you watering the Swiss chard. So let's go ahead and water this Swiss chard. What I'm going to do is go down to the base of the Swiss chard and like right around the Swiss chard. Hope y'all can see it. And that's where I'm going to water. I'm not going to water the peppers right now because they don't need it. And of course, some of this water will go to the peppers, but the peppers' feet, like all of the roots, won't be soaked. But that's all I do to water plants that's in a bed with plants that don't need lots of water. Going straight down into the soil, there's nothing pooling. That's decent drainage. And so there are also squash in this bed. I'm going to water them the same way. So squash, you can water over top of them, but squash are also prone to, I think it's called downy mildew. And so if you get water on the plants and then the water just kind of sits, then it can bring the disease of downy mildew in. So I try to water them at the base as well. Another thing to be cognizant of, and I will tell you I am the biggest offender of this, is you should water early morning. If you can't do it early morning, then you should do it in the evening when the sun goes down. Again, I'm the biggest offender of it. I will water when I need to water. If my soil is dry, if my plants are drooping, I'm going to water. But rule of thumb, when you read early morning, late evening, it allows the soil to actually, you know, pull up the moisture without evaporation and without, you know, the sun beaming down on it. So just keep that in mind. I don't subscribe to it. I do it when I can, and when I can't, I don't, and my garden still flourishes. So there are vegetables that need lots of water. Sweet potatoes are one of those. And so here's my sweet potatoes over here in this sweet potato bed. And then of course I have more that I planted out later over there. Came out of the compost pile. A sweet potato was in the compost pile and it sprouted. And so I decided to keep them and put them over there. That's an area that stays moist a lot because it's in shade a lot. So sweet potatoes need a good amount of sun, but they also need a good amount of water. And I grew my sweet potatoes over there last year. I have a tree I need to cut down that's causing a lot of that shade. But anyway, as it relates to how I water these, Same way I water the strawberries, because strawberries, you know, have a high water content too. I spray them very well. I water them very deeply, and I do spray the leaves. All right, so up next are the bags, and probably the last thing. If I missed something and you are interested in knowing what I do with it, let me know. But let's talk about the bags. So bags are pretty easy, if I'm honest, because you can lift your bag and feel how heavy it is. Like this one is pretty heavy. Even though the top of the soil looks dry, it looks very dry. When you dig down, you can see it is not dry. So we won't be watering this bag of peppers down deep in the soil, and because peppers have deep roots, it is moist. That's what I'm getting from this. The bag is heavy. The plant is not drooping. The plant is not showing any signs of distress. It is green. It is not yellow. I'm not gonna water it. The bag is heavy. But over here, the tomatoes, they look absolutely awesome too. That bag is not that heavy, but it's not that light. But I'm gonna water this tomato just to show you that I essentially just water the soil. I do not get the water on the leaves at all. When it rains, it does though. Keep that in mind. Also, look at all of those tomatoes, y'all. That is a great white. Look at that. How awesome. I mean, it's just amazing. Growing in a 7-gallon bag. A few people have asked me what size bags I'm growing my potatoes, tomatoes, and peppers in. They're 7-gallon. They're all 7-gallon bags. I bought the same size because I like uniformity. And so that's what I purchased. I purchased 7-gallon bags the first time, and so that's what I kept purchasing because that's what I had. But they're 7-gallon bags. We're gonna go ahead and water this tomato. I'm not gonna water all of them. They look fine. They're doing fine. The other thing is, with tomatoes, you do want to check them quite often, especially in bags, because if you have to do a large, deep watering, tomatoes can split if they get a lot of water at one time, and I don't want to do that. So nothing's drooping, nothing's looking like it needs water. So I'm gonna water this one just to show you all. It can't hurt it. We're just gonna come right down here and water directly into the soil. That's all we're gonna do. If you have any leaves that's like hanging down in the soil, I would recommend taking them out because that's where you're gonna get some of your disease from. You can see at the bottom of this one, there's a little bit of disease on those leaves. So we're just gonna take them out if they are touching the soil at all. And if you have any weeds, this would be a good time to go ahead and grab the weeds and pull them out too. Just so that your plant isn't fighting for nutrients from something you don't even want. I do just like that. I let it pool and then I let it go down. And you can see it's going down pretty quickly, so the drainage is decent in this bag. And that's pretty much all I do to water my bags. That's about it. Is that your basil? Is that your basil? You just laying there fine. Ain't you the cutest little thing? You are the cutest little thing. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Don't forget to visit me over on Instagram, where I post about the things going on in the garden almost every day. Bye, y'all.